Hey everybody, Jarek the Gaming Dragon here. Quick, off the top of your head, tell me your top 3 favorite movie-based games. I agree, I can't think of 3. Movie-based games are often a train wreck. There may be a few diamonds in the rough like GoldenEye or the Chronicles of Riddick, or GoldenEye, but those are the exceptions to the rule. So when King Kong came around, people didn't exactly have very high expectations, and most people were surprised by it being a pretty decent game. Now, I never played this game back in the day. I do have memories of my older brother playing it on the 360 and remembering it looking, pretty okay, but I never played it. At this point, we know that the King Kong game is a good game. So my expectations were actually not everyone else's. Everyone else had low expectations, and the game surprised them. I had fairly high expectations, so it didn't surprise me, and some things kind of disappointed me, but it was still a pretty decent game. Oh, I'm sorry. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. Some higher-up executive thought this is a good name. What's wrong with just King Kong? Sure, that name may overlap with some other games, but that never stopped publishers before. It didn't stop Bethesda from naming Doom 2016 Doom, so we all call it Doom 2016. It doesn't stop Activision from calling the newest Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the third Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4, then the remake, now a new one totally not attached to those games. The end result is that you get angry and rage while you're playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019, and you Google it because you want to find someone else that's just as angry as you are at that specific thing, and you find all these other games. But even that's better than calling it Call of Duty 16, the official game of Modern Warfare. But I digress. This is actually quite a decent game. It released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and original Xbox, then in 2006 for the Xbox 360. This Xbox 360 2006 version is the version that was ported to PC, which is what you were seeing here. This is one of the worst ports I have ever seen in my life. Beating the game without it crashing is a struggle, and to make things worse, there's no autosave, so if you had forgotten to save, you're going back to whatever level you saved on last. There's not even any error when it crashes, it just closes on you. Out of nowhere. When you launch the game, it'll tell you your drivers are out of date, whatever, it's an old game, just ignore this, the game will still launch, but it'll also pop up a window allowing you to change settings. This is the only place you can change your controls. You have to change your controls out of the game. Surprisingly enough, this game does allow for 16:9 aspect ratios, including 1440p, which is nice since that's what I'm running on, but this will make everything letterboxed, so you need to download an external fix to fix the problem. Mouse aim feels awful. It feels like your mouse is an etch-and-sketch. To make things even worse, you can't really raise the sensitivity of your mouse very high since it's based off a controller, so it's really slow. If you download an external fix, you can make it move faster, which kinda helps it feeling like an etch-and-sketch, but then your mouse is too sensitive, but you just have to deal with it, otherwise it feels terrible. A lot of the vegetation was giving me artifacting issues, which drew me out of the game, and no, it's not my GPU, this GPU runs perfectly fine in other games, it's just this game. And again, it crashes for no reason. Even something as simple as alt-tabbing will crash this game without fail. You can't make a borderless window to fix this problem, borderless gaming doesn't work with it, and it doesn't have an option in-game. And to make things even worse, this is one of those games that allows you to click on your second screen, so if you accidentally click on your second screen, the game alt-tabs and then crashes. To make things even better, there are certain parts of this game that you cannot continue unless you limit your frame rate to 40 FPS. You can limit it in many different ways, but the best way is to download an external fix. You will have to do so many things just to run this game. Now, this is not to the detriment of the original game. This is very clearly just a bad port, but ranting makes me feel better about it because this really was frustrating trying to play the game and deal with all this extra bullshit. Okay, now that we're past all of that, let's actually talk about the game. I don't think I need to cover the story. It covers Peter Jackson's King Kong. This movie came out around 2005, I want to say, off the top of my head, and I remember actually going to see this movie in theaters. It wasn't fresh in my mind, but I clearly remembered it being a good movie. So I would hope most of you guys already know the story behind King Kong, and really that's not the interesting part of this game. The gameplay is quite unique from any other game I've played. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie, allows you to play as two different characters, Jack Driscoll and Kong himself. Let's focus on Jack first, because even though this looks like a standard first-person shooter, it certainly does not play like a standard first-person shooter. The controls are rather awkward, but they don't necessarily play bad, so to say, at least in first person. In order to fire your weapon, you have to hold down the spacebar. There's no jumping in this game, so, that's fine. Hold down the spacebar and you'll bring up your weapon, or hold up your spear as if you're going to throw it. At this point you can right-click the weapon to aim down the sights, but I find that aiming is so generous in this game that I never have to do this. You can fire anywhere near the enemy and you are going to hit them. Other than that, movement and whatnot feels mostly like a first-person shooter. What's different is how you pick up weapons and the spears. This game doesn't give you a tremendous amount of ammo, so you are going to have to use these spears liberally. The spears can't be used forever. You'll take a few hits with them and then they'll break. You can either poke at the enemies or you can throw them, but again, they're going to break, so you're going to need to find another one. This is where piles of bones are incredibly useful. You can get an infinite pile of quote-unquote spears by picking up bones out of a pile of bones. These magically work as spears and can somehow be lit on fire. They'll still break, but again, you'll get an infinite number of these if you go back to that pile of bones. And again, you will have to use these. Although the biggest problem I had at the controls while in first person was the fact that to pick anything up, you had to left click. This meant that the action button is the same as the fire button, and that can really suck. You're aiming at an enemy you want to shoot and you accidentally pick up a spear instead of firing your gun, and then you die. It didn't happen very often, but when it did happen, it was really annoying. Other than that though, it's fine, it's not too weird. The extra gimmick the spears have is that if you poke the spear at fire, you will light the end of the spear on fire. No matter if it's a bone or a spear, which has a metal end that somehow gets lit on fire, but ignore that. This fire is important because there's a lot of puzzles in this game that require you to light things on fire so that you can progress. This is fine, it helps break up the monotony of shooting the same dinosaurs over and over. Overall, this combat system does a pretty good job making you feel rather helpless compared to a bunch of giant enemies all trying to murder you. As for the Kong sections, this is where my expectations kind of let me down a bit. I expected a lot more out of these sections. You're playing as Kong. This could go in so many different ways. But instead, I only really came up with a lot of complaints. For starters, the camera is a pain in the ass. You can't control the camera at will. This camera system works a lot like the old Silent Hill games. These controls are tank controls. And it gets even more confusing when you turn a corner, the camera changes, and now the button you're pushing to move forward is suddenly backward. For a game like Silent Hill, you can forgive it, but for something like King Kong where you're running and fighting, this is a big nuisance. The game also does a really poor job explaining things to you. Oftentimes the tutorials happen as enemies are attacking you, and the tutorials will give you wrong prompts. The first tutorial got me killed many times because I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Later on in the game I figured out what it was trying to get me to do was actually completely different key bindings than what it was telling me. Anyway, at first these Kong levels are actually pretty cool. You're playing as Kong and you're beating up T-Rexes and just yeeting dinosaurs outside of the map. That sounds fun, and it is for a while. But the more you play it, the more it gets incredibly repetitive. Controls are very basic. Left click to just hit people out of your way, right click to grab them. Spacebar is to jump, climb, and dodge. That's really it. The end result is that you end up saving Anne over and over and over again and fighting the same T-Rex over and over and over again. Again, at first this is cool, but it kind of starts getting annoying when the game stops telling you really what you're supposed to be doing, the camera angle gets confusing, the controls get annoying, and it's just very repetitive. Amazing concept, but about 70% of the way through the game I stopped having fun with these sections and they just kind of started feeling like busy work. The first person segments fared quite a bit better, but again, they also started to feel like busy work because the game started getting so repetitive. Remember when I said I had higher expectations about this game than other people did? I feel like most people didn't expect anything from this game, so they sort of forgave all these faults, whereas I expected it to be a good game and a little too repetitive to be great. But it's still a good game, don't get me wrong. There is so much polish in this game that I just really have to forgive all of its faults. The animations on Kong himself look incredibly smooth, the same thing for all the enemies. The world you're in for 2005 is quite amazing. Looking off in the distance and seeing the God rays coming back at you and just seeing the whole world built around you, there was clearly a lot of love and care put into this game. Again, this is 2005. It may not look like Fear, but Fear looked better than everything else at the time anyway. This game still looks better than most games that came out in 2005. That was definitely the thing I was most impressed by. Animation quality was incredibly smooth for all the creatures around you. A little less so for the first person elements, but for everything around you it was quite smooth, and graphics just kind of took me in, even today. The game somehow managed to avoid the stereotype of a game feeling like a cinematic movie where the player has no control over the pace of the game. There's tons of set pieces, but I never felt like I was forced to go at the pace the game wanted me to. I felt like I was allowed to go slower or faster, with few exceptions. The segments that got me the most annoyed were the Kong segments that put me on a limited timer even if you couldn't see the timer. Save Anne before she dies from something. Those elements of a movie conflict directly with gameplay elements, and that's really the most frustrating part about the game, but those are so few and far between. And as much as I'm dogging on the Kong levels, they were quite fun when I first started playing them, and the last level of the game is some of the most fun I had in a long time. You just get to play as Kong wreaking havoc in New York City, and I wish they gave me a little more time with this. I mean, how is it not fun to throw cars at people? So what more is there to say? It's a movie-based game that exceeded everyone's expectations. A movie-based game being anything other than complete garbage is a surprise to everyone. Just for your own sake, Get the 360 version, don't get the PC version. It will give you a complete headache and make you rage every time it crashes. But other than that, I don't have much more to say. It's a surprisingly decent game that you can have fun with even today. If you want to check it out, I would recommend getting it. But thanks to all of you that have watched this video to the end, and thanks to everyone that came out and hung out with me while I was streaming this game. If you want to come hang out in the future, come follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Jarek4GamingDragon. You get to see my videos one day ahead of time if you subscribe on Twitch. Same thing for my Patreon, patreon.com/Jarek4. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter's down there, twitter.com/Jarek_Dragon. Again, thanks to all you guys for watching, and I will see you next video.